This is Mayor Suzette DeBeetham Brown. In the absence of Councillor Rickford Curtin, which is the chair for the Admin and Education Committee, I will call this meeting to order. Please note that Councillor Curtin is not here as yet. However, Councillor Patrick DiLorenzo and Deputy Mayor Mann is on the meeting, along with Sharon Howe, Assistant to the Town Manager, and our Town Manager, Robert Smith. So he did have referred item 1920-44, discussion and possible action regarding Affordable Housing Plan Technical Assistance Program. I don't know if that was sent out to us, India.
The housing plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have it. It wasn't sent out with this agenda, but you guys received it at the last council meeting, which was last Monday, the 13th, in your packet. I don't know if there's something else that you were looking for to review.
I think we were trying to find out some information. I believe it was from
Jose Gainer.
Was it John?
Jose Gainer?
Jose Gainer.
And he was supposed to be providing us some information. We did go quickly over some numbers because he wanted to put in the application, but I thought there was supposed to be some discussion as to ideas as to what the money would be used for, and things of that nature. So I believe that that's why it was on this agenda. But I don't see Jonathan. And I don't know if the town manager has any more information than he did the last time.
I do have some general information, Mayor. I did speak with Jose earlier today, and I know he intended on attending the meeting this evening. And in fact, we were signing some of the paperwork associated with the application. The funding is largely grant-based, and as indicated in the last meeting, there's a $5,000 amount that is provided in kind by the town, and it's basically going to be Jose's time working on the grant project. Funding would be in part for civic engagement and public input, so there would be a series of meetings with the public to solicit information from them. There's also funding in there for a market analysis. And then the production of the plan itself and printing. So he and I talked generally about using this as an opportunity to gather housing resources across Bloomfield together and come up with an organized approach to how we want to launch and create more housing resources for our community. And the things that we initially talked about were Habitat for Humanity, the Housing Authority, and potentially CDBG and home funds. We recognize that we have a program out there that needs to be cleaned up, but I do think with appropriate training and appropriate application, we could make those funds useful again. It's been a while since CDBG has been in our community doing work for housing. And that's about the extent of the details that I have.
So please, India, correct. I'm saying Jonathan, but it should have been Jose. So please correct me in your notes. I think one of the things that when we talked about it at council was to make sure that it's not just another fluff grant, but that it is something that's going to provide our town with meaningful information. One of the complaints that we do get in town is that there is no affordable housing. So if we're going to have a grant like this in place, I think applying for the grant is one thing, getting the funds is another thing, but oversight and making sure that the funds is spent in a way that produces something that we can take and do something meaningful for our community, I think is important. I'm going to open it up to the other members of the committee for any input.
Okay. Yep.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I think this is a very delicate subject in a way, because it's very easy to raise expectations and not be able to follow through with something like this. As far as I've heard about this grant project, it's a study grant. It may not have any money to produce one unit of affordable housing, and therefore we have to be very careful how we present this. I think the idea of working with some of the existing partners like Habitat or anybody else that's out there is wonderful. But I think the purpose of the study is to assess what the resources are out there these days, to see what could be done if we come up with an approach or a policy or some alternatives. It's not like the old days where there's a federal or state investment in this kind of housing. That's why I say we have to be very cautious. I also have to wonder, since some of the housing people involved have been with the Community Services Committee, maybe they need to be weighing on this at some point too. I'm not sure now is the time. I think once we have go through the act of preparing a policy, they should be involved, or somehow maybe a joint meeting or something of that sort. But I think we're a ways away, and I don't know how long it's going to take Jose or the town to prepare such a grant application. And that grant application, again, is, as I understand it, will provide us with some funding to actually prepare a policy. And Mr. Manager, if that's not correct, please tell me otherwise.
I think that's accurate. The technical assistance grant is there so that we can take all of the different pieces that are on the table and hear from the public and hear from council and try to put an approach together, which, you know, we heard from, I think, the Housing Authority a couple of weeks back on, they had some thoughts about moving forward. And I know Jose has worked with Habitat before, but we really don't have an organized approach where everything's moving together in coordination with itself. And so this is an opportunity for us to get information from the council and from the citizens and really target what we do next.
When was the grant due?
I think, I don't know the exact date that the grant was due. It was a first come, first serve application. And we've struggled to get it out the door. It's been a couple of weeks, us trying to get it out the door.
Is it possible for us to see what the grant document looked, now that you guys have gotten it out the door? Can we get a copy of it?
I thought that you guys were copied on that in the last meeting. Did that not come to you?
I don't think so. I think that was a part of the problem at the last meeting, was we saw it, but we didn't have any full understanding of what it was and what it said. So I would like to request that this committee get a copy of the grant documents. And I would also like to request that this item be placed back on the next agenda, as the chair isn't here. So he might have had some other input that he wanted on this item. Councilor DiLorenzo, any input? I think you can unmute yourself if you want to say something. Can you? Yeah.
This is Councilor DiLorenzo. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree. I thought that what we did at the council meeting was we had said for Jose Geiner to go forward and, submit the grant application because it was on such a tight time frame, and then we would take up the rest of it later, which I think involved that $5,000 that we as a town would have to put forth in order for Jose to do the necessary work that was around the grant. But I think what Councilor Mann had indicated was what I understood, that the grant was to do a study, initiate a study to determine what type of housing we have in the town of Bloomfield and, where there might be gaps and where we could try to get more affordable housing. And I know that Mr. Bob Berman, who heads the Housing Authority here in Bloomfield, West Hartford, Bloomfield, I think it's both areas, should also be we maybe included in some of those conversations, since I know he's interested in getting more properties to add to that list. So maybe we could.
I think it's Bloomfield and Windsor Housing Authority.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I was mixing that up with the health district.
No, that's okay.
My mistake. My fault. You're right.
You're forgiven. You're forgiven.
It's being cooped up all day. I can't take it. Okay, so that was my only comment, that I think we should, move it forward and, and put it back. Oh, I see Chairman Curtin is here, so maybe.
I am ready to go ahead and relinquish the rest of this meeting to the chairman. Councilor Curtin, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Okay, he said 1 second. He's having a problem with his connection.
Oh, okay.
He said you can continue, Suzanne. He's just trying to get on and everything.
Okay, so I know that there should also be a, so as I've asked you, India, to correct my faux pas from Jonathan to Jose. Also, we have asked that we get a copy of the grant to this committee.
Okay.
And asking that this item be on the next agenda for this committee, because we want to talk about process. And I do understand that it is just a study grant, but process is in how we get our residents engaged, process in how we engage other organizations like Habitat for Humanity, process in looking at the CBDG grant, because I know based on that, we had some issues with a lady in her roof and all that stuff that went down. We have some issues with people not replenishing the fund. So some things have to be looked at, right? In studying, we have to look at the entire picture, that if some funds do become available, that we are going to be better fiduciaries of those funds, and that we will do
I sent you an email.
that we will do a better job with trying to bring affordable housing to our town of Bloomfield. I believe that there's supposed to be a report from our town manager. India, is that the next thing on the agenda?
While we're still on this, can I speak on this one more time?
Yes, sir.
Maybe the manager has a sense of what the turnaround time might be with this application. To have a meeting before we know we got accepted or what the deal is would seem to be not a good use of time. Are we likely to hear back on this grant within a month, 2 months? What do you think? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, we really don't know how quickly the state is going to get back to us. I assume that they're under duress just like we are, and it'll be some time. But the grant is very general in nature in terms of technical assistance. It's very broad. So we have the ability to dial that in as council desires if we get the funding. So the important thing is to get in line and try and secure it. Like the mayor said, we'll have details out to you as soon as possible. I didn't realize that you didn't have copies of that.
I think we got a copy of just the bare bones of the application, the front page or something like that, but there was no discussion in there about numbers or problems that we're trying to meet necessarily, or ways of meeting it. So I don't want to create another meeting if we're not going to have anything to discuss on it, unless we want to move forward on our own to prepare a policy.
I think one of the things, David, that kind of took me aback, as I'm remembering the meeting piece by piece, is I had asked about the numbers, and Jose wasn't able to tell me how the grant was broken out, but someone who was watching Zoom was able to dial in and tell me about the numbers. I was a little bit caught off guard, as I'm sure all the counselors were, because we had no clue.
Right.
So yes, I would like to look over this grant. I would like to see what it says, and I'd like for us to be a little bit proactive. So if it's okay with the chair, once we get the grant document and we can look it over, I think it'll be prudent for us to start the discussion on how this will be rolled out. But once again, this is just my opinion. I'm not the chair, so I will stand down as I see the chairs here.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. My apologies for my tardiness. Number one, I had this meeting on my schedule for 6:30. I was on a work call, and while I attempted to log on, I couldn't. So I'm here, and I heard some of the conversation. I do agree with you, Madam Mayor. I would like to see this on the May agenda. I was hoping that I would see Jose here tonight to get an update from him, but I don't think he's on the current call. But I do see Councilor Di Lorenzo with his hands up, so I'll go ahead and unmute him. Go ahead, Councilor Di Lorenzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up with one quick question, and that is for a clarification about the $5,000. At what point, and maybe the town manager could answer this, do we wait until we hear back from the state that we've been awarded a grant, then we pony up the 5K, or when does the town need to send the put the 5K forward?
It's an in-kind amount, so we're not physically.
Oh, so there's not actually a dollar
Right.
exchange. We're just saying $5,000 worth of
Jose's time.
Okay, I didn't understand. I didn't get that part. So thank you for clarifying that, Madam Mayor. Okay, well then that was my question. Yeah, I think we need to know. We did have the breakdown. Unfortunately, I don't have those notes in front of me, but I did. I believe it was former Councilman McCleary who sent the breakdown. Yeah, he sent the breakdown in the chat on Zoom. So I did see that and I jotted it down, but I don't have it in front of me. So there is a breakdown.
But I think we should have it. I think we should have an understanding of what's being put out there. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. That was my.
You're welcome. Is there any other question on this topic? Okay, moving right on. Report from the town manager.
Thank you, Chair. I sent the committee this evening, and I apologize for the tardiness, an update via email. Hopefully you guys have access to that. A large part of that information was submitted to council earlier this morning. So just for the benefit of members of the committee, hey, Jose. For the benefit of members of the committee, in terms of the health district, today the health district board of directors met this morning. They approved a revised budget for FY 2021, much like the town is revising its budget. The revisions impact to the town was an additional $3,300 expense. They've cut back on some of their expenditures, but they also anticipate reductions in their revenues. And at the end of the day, given the pandemic and anticipating future waves of the virus, as well as a vaccination program, they have put forward a $3,300 increase over what their original budget was. I think that was the number that was presented to council on 3/2 with the manager's original proposed budget. Today, additionally, the board of directors appointed Amy Kraus as the director of the health district. And they approved an employment agreement with Ms. Kraus so that she could move from the acting position into the full-on directorship of the health district. I believe in addition to the information that's been circulated to you, there's data that our health district has been capturing on West Hartford and Bloomfield related to COVID-19's positive cases as well as mortality. She's been gathering data from the state system and maintaining her own database at the district to provide additional information to us. My hope is that the data will prove useful to us in the future if we can reach out and try and secure additional PPE or resources as we face additional waves of the virus as it comes forward in the fall and the following spring. Regarding the Public Works Director, we began solicitation for applications for that position shortly after Mr. Lawler resigned. Shortly after that, the pandemic happened and we declared a state of emergency. We haven't pursued filling that vacancy while we've been under a state of emergency. It's not been practical for us to try and do that. And I have appointed Dan Carter as the acting director of that department. And he's filling that chair while we go through the emergency and we go through the process to interview people for that position. And that's my update for the committee.
Rick, you're muted.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for that. This day's not working the way I intended to, but any event, thank you for that, Robert. Appreciate the report. I have a question. I did have a chance to look at the data in regards to the pandemic and COVID-19. And in doing my analysis comparing to Bloomfield and West Hartford, it was surprising that we weren't that far off when it comes to the numbers compared to a larger town. And I was trying to dig into that. Now, I look at the population of West Hartford and Bloomfield from a demographic standpoint. And obviously West Hartford is a little bit more broad when it comes to a demographic. Bloomfield, larger percentages, minority, African Americans, and so on. And you do see the disparity when it comes to health. So in regards to the health district, when it comes to a lot of these chronic diseases and stuff, what are we doing to better educate our community, starting from the schools and so on, in healthier living and to prevent some of these chronic illness? So I think that, in my opinion, moving forward, would be an area that the health district could really look into. And what do we do to educate the public in regards to a much healthier living and so on? So that was pretty revealing for me when I looked at the data, is that what is West Hartford population? Roughly around 50-something thousand or so?
They're about 3 times our size.
Correct. So, and the numbers is close when it comes to how many folks have contracted the virus, plus how many folks have passed away from the virus. So that's definitely something that I would love for us to look into from a data point standpoint. I see the deputy mayor has his hands up. I will go ahead and unmute him.
I think the issues you're raising are real ones. We're beginning to feel out around the country all the reasons why those numbers are showing up that way. And hopefully there will be a broader attempt to try and resolve some of those disparities that are existing. But I'm not sure what the role of the health district is going to be to make that change. I was more concerned about a question that the manager, from the manager's report, talking of a $3,300 increase to the town. Does that incorporate any of the discussions that we have been having with the district about upgrading our code enforcement participation?
David, we have not had those discussions with the health district. We haven't gotten into that with them. The second that the emergency popped, we focused on our internal operation as well as following the governor's orders. So we haven't followed through on the code enforcement front yet.
So is that budget that they mentioned, has that been approved, or is it in process, or?
Their board approved that budget this morning.
No, okay. We'll have to deal with it later. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on something that the deputy mayor said, and I disagree with that. I do believe it's the responsibility of the health district when it comes to a community like us or West Hartford per se, and identifying those health issues and coming up with a plan to handle it and to approach what we could do to better it. Just like the CDC, they have an obligation and responsibility from a more global standpoint across the country to provide healthier living and provide data on why we're having these issues. So I do believe the health district do have a large role to play. And I think the report that the town manager sent out today, when you look and see the various responsibilities of the health district in regards to Bloomfield and West Hartford, this falls under their purview. So I do believe that's something that we definitely need to look into. I see that Councilor DiLorenzo had his hands up first. I will go ahead and unmute you. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I agree. I also studied those numbers and I totally agree. For a town the size of Bloomfield, with Hartford being West Hartford being 3 times the size of Bloomfield, our numbers were close, and in some instances ours were higher. I thought that maybe one of the issues around that is that we have a very large elderly population in the town of Bloomfield. We have, several senior living centers, and I don't know if statewide by town, what is the percentage of, elderly people in the town of Bloomfield versus the rest of the state. But I think I would guess that it's pretty high, given that we have so many places here in town that residents choose to live in. So I was thinking that possibly some of the reason that it is as high as it is due to nursing home and or other retirement communities. But I don't know if that's true. So I agree, though. I think something needs to be done to, help improve the health and well-being of our citizens, by, if that's part of the health district's larger plan, then maybe we should be, hearing from the health district on what is their future vision for, working with improving the health and well-being of our citizens. So yeah, those numbers that was very troubling to me.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, you had your hands up.
Yeah, so I have two questions. So Deputy Mayor asked if the added responsibility of enforcement, we haven't gotten that conversation with the district, so that might be costing us some money. So we need to be mindful of that. And I want to go back to what everyone has been saying, that the health of our residents is a part of the reasons why we have the health district. So if we're not seeing the health benefits, then we need to let them know that there's other issues that they need to be taken up. West Hartford and Bloomfield, while we might have some of the same health issues, we also have different health issues. So it can't just be if they do diabetes for one, they're going to do diabetes for the other, or if they do calorie count for one, they'll do calorie count for the other. They have to figure out what our residents, what their needs are based on our demographics, based on our race and ethnicity, to be able to provide those meaningful services. So just wanted to put that out there. You're on mute, Rickford.
1 second. I see Councilor Mann has his hands unmuted. 1 second. Yep, you're ready to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think there's anybody amongst us that would argue against what's been said about trying to figure out why the disparities exist. My point was clearly made to, unless the insurance industry, unless the hospital medical industry, and unless the governmental payments for medical care and so forth are changing, putting the pressure on the West Hartford Bloomfield district is not going to galvanize or make changes significant to make you feel as though you've accomplished something. I think if what you're saying is more of an educational outcome by pointing out some of the living the characteristics of living close together, or living close to an urban center with bad air, and living close to other people, too close to other people, or whatever, or how to avoid diabetes, or live well, exercise, eat right. Yeah, I think they can do that. It's not going to change the world. So I have to be very careful about raising expectations that we can't deliver on. And I would think that the other issues are appropriate. How can they continue to inform our residents to be safe? That's all I think their role is right now. And unless we're all willing as a community to beef up their operation and have them, do the work of, state, national government, or large NGOs. I mean, let's put it in perspective. Thank you.
Town manager. Yep.
Sorry about that. I had it muted. We're really early into this, and we have some data, but we don't really understand it yet. And we do need to take a look at the data and our population demographic and try to make some correlations. My anecdotal conversation with Amy over the data was that a lot of the mortality that we saw was in our senior facilities. And if that is the case, that's a different kind of aid that we need to be hitting the state up for. That's a different kind of follow through with the state that we need to pursue. And I agree. It looks to me like there's a disproportionate share of folks that suffer from the negative impacts of COVID-19. And if it's possible for us to find out who those populations are and figure out a way to help them, we should. But we're really fresh on the data, and we haven't done any analysis between what's been collected here and what our population profile looks like. So we need a little time to do that.
Yeah, and Robert, before you go back on mute, I think it's important for us to really get a true understanding of the role, because even within our conversation here, we have different opinions on the role of the health district. So I think that's critical to understand the role. Because I do see the health district doing seminars and stuff within our schools, within the high schools. That's important. But once again, we don't want to sit here and debate what we believe it is. I think we should have some factual information on the role of the health district. So I think that's something that I would hope that we could have in May. And hopefully I would invite Amy to our May meeting to further discuss this. Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm getting this very. So, any more questions from the committee? Any public comments? No public comments.
No
Hearing
comments?
none. Do I have here is a hand raised?
Question. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering if you had any update on the status of the matrix report. That where are we? What plans do we have to either resurrect, complete, or otherwise eliminate it? And whether or not we want to speak to Mr. Geiner, who came on later, and maybe he has some other information on the first item we talked about. Those two questions.
Robert? David, weren't you referring to the matrix report, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Robert, could you elaborate on that, please?
The last that I remember of the matrix report, there was continued issues with the report that had been generated. I attempted to help with the drafting of that and received direction not to follow through with the provision of additional information. And so at that point, I believe that the committee associated with working with that vendor was going to have additional conversation directly with that vendor. And I don't know that that has occurred.
Patrick?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my recollection of this is, no, that none of that has occurred. There's been no communication with us in Matrix. The last that we met with him, we were supposed to meet back in December or January, and there was a snowstorm, and the gentleman's flight was canceled. And then we tried to relook after that, but we could never find a time that worked for on any of our calendars, and it was just very. And then it just kind of dropped. I don't really know. Excuse me. I thought also that he was to provide us with an updated document with all of the points that we addressed. We had one call with him back in the early fall, maybe September, early September. He was to provide a document back to us addressing all of the items that we went over point by point. And we also had Cindy, our director of HR. She was on the call. I don't know that we ever received the updated document. He did give us a document where he reviewed our charter, I believe, and he did like a comparison between what was in the charter and whether or not we should change it. I got nothing out of that. I did see it, but it really didn't provide me with any sort of helpful guidance. So I'm very disappointed. I will go on record, and I'm sure the mayor and Councilor Curtin may agree with me. I'm extremely disappointed in Matrix and where we are with this. It has just been dropped and nothing further has happened. So I don't know, Robert, where we should go with this, because I thought that we should have had something else happen by now, and there has.
I just want to follow up with that. I do agree with Councilor Di Lorenzo. I'm also disappointed with this because I know at one point we were waiting for information back from the consultant, and then everything fell apart. Now, within that process, I think for some reason we had the consultant working with the various members of the various managers within the departments to help guide on what the outcome should be. And I thought that kind of threw everything apart. So I know we spend a lot of money on this, a lot of time has it been invested, and I am just disappointed. I was very optimistic about the potential of a report to give us some guidance. When we came into office in 2017, we've heard from a lot of folks talking about the various departments not having adequate staff to conduct their work. So I think every single member of the council wanted to invest in to really get a true understanding instead of just, hearing things of what's going on. And like I said, I was very excited with the opportunity to get some information for us to make decisions, and that just fell apart. And that's extremely disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go ahead and add my 2 cents to that. I'm also very disappointed. We hired a consulting firm to come in and give us an unbiased, inventory of what we had for staff and for our departments, and that didn't work. And I think what exacerbated the situation was when Robert got the report, and then Robert also tried to help the consultant come up with whatever. So I don't believe that we received what we paid for. I do believe that Matrix should make good on the contract and should make good on what they have been paid thus far, and whatever balance that we have for them should not be released. So we paid for an unbiased, impartial assessment of our town staff and function, and we didn't get any of that. Some of the things that he had in his report, you can tell that it came from other places, or that it was generic. There was nothing really that specific to us. And then when we also had another mix of having Robert tried to help the situation out, I think it just made the situation worse. So I am in full agreement with Counselor DiLorenzo and Counselor Curtin, but I'm going to go a step further. They still owe us a product. And some way, somehow, we need to get that product, or we need to get our money back. I'd like to go on record by saying that.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor, before I let the Deputy Mayor go ahead, I don't believe at this point there's anything that this consultant can do, in my opinion, to recover from that. I mean, because the question is, what kind of product are we going to receive at that point? So
We need our money back.
I will go ahead and lower the Deputy Mayor's hands.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I came to that conclusion as well. If we haven't reached some sort of accommodation or a new direction as to how to proceed by now, I think everybody's lost interest. I don't know how this thing can be recovered. So I would say, I would hope that perhaps by the next meeting that there have been some resolution, or at least some discussion with the vendor, and see what the options might be for us to move forward so we can make a decision. Because the longer it hangs out there, nobody looks good for that. So we don't get anything out of it either.
Yeah. Town Manager?
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer one thought, just some clarification. When the committee asked me to get involved, we began contemplating providing additional information to the vendor. However, that information was not conveyed to the vendor, and it did not affect the vendor's contemplation or their work product when it came to the charter review. We were collecting that information and we were preparing to deliver it, and I got signal from the committee that we should not do that, and so I stopped. And based on the direction from the committee, I did reach out to the vendor and say, look, this is not what the committee's looking for. You need to reach back out to the committee and pursue this further with them, because they have very specific ideas about what they want. And, you know, I've tried to communicate with them initially, and then, like you said, it seemed like there was no way to pull that person in and have a meeting with them. It just didn't seem to come together. Anyway, I just wanted to offer that for clarification.
You're muted, Rickford.
I don't know why it keeps just reverting back to muted. I do agree with everyone. We do need some sort of report back in May, and we need to come to a resolution on this. We did not get a complete product, and there should be some sort of reimbursement, if that's the case, to the town. So hopefully, Robert, you can follow up with the consultant and just express you know, what was said here tonight, and try to get some sort of resolution on this. So hopefully I will, India, if we could add this to the May agenda, the first week in May, and hopefully we could get some feedback on this. Thank you. Any more questions for the town manager? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Oh, hold a second. I see your hands. Jose?
Yeah, I just want to apologize. For some reason, I thought the meeting was at 6:30, so
Jose, join the club. I also thought it was at 6:30.
So
Yeah.
I came on a little late. I don't know if there was any questions or anything you needed me to report on.
At this point, Jose, we'll leave it for May,
Okay,
and we'll go from there. So we'll just go ahead. Do you have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So move.
Second.
Second, I have a motion, second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstention? The ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening, all.
thank you, you too.
You.
All right,
Bye, everybody.
stay safe.
You too.
Too.